Ladies and gentlemen, this is TVP World. I'm your host Benjamin Lee, and welcome aboard the Eastern Express. In some countries, election season means rallies, debates, and maybe a few scandals about campaign spending. In Moldova, this year, it means something else entirely. Cyberattacks, vote buying, AI-generated disinformation, and, if President Maia Sandu is right, a Kremlin-led plan to seize control of parliament without firing a shot. Like we mentioned earlier this week, when Russia wants to conquer a country, it doesn't always send tanks. Sometimes it sends hackers, cash, and fake news, and right now, Moldova is in the crosshairs. So, without further ado, let's take a look at our today's report.
The people of Moldova will be heading to the polls in parliamentary elections set to be held in late September. Election season is a very sensitive and tumultuous period for the country, as it balances between the West and the East. Although recent elections have primed Moldova in the former's direction, EU membership and being a part of the Euro-Atlantic community are not a given. Different sides always vie for attention during election periods in Moldova, and one of them is of course the Russian Federation. Through propaganda, disinformation campaigns, or allegedly even through vote buying, Moscow tries to sway public opinion to suit its own needs. The country's president, Maia Sandu, has accused Russia of planning what she called an unprecedented election interference campaign during the September vote. She says that Moscow has earmarked a stunning €100 million for this effort. She has also accused two of Moldova's leading opposition parties of capitalizing on Russian-backed operations to weaken her own party, which holds a majority. The Kremlin sees Moldova as an important part of the Central Eastern European geopolitical puzzle. Especially since the start of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, eyes have been on this small country as a possible further target for Russian aggression. Time and again, the people of Moldova have chosen a path towards European integration and away from the so-called Ruski Mir, the Russian world. But each of these victories has been hard fought and many were close calls. It is expected that this time will be the same, despite Western and EU support.
And now let's zone in on the East-planning portion of our show. Russia's influence in Moldova can mostly be seen in the regions of Caucasia and Transnistria. Recent developments in both of these areas have led to concerns that Moscow may use them to destabilize the country ahead of Moldova's parliamentary elections.
Transnistria is a strip of land between Moldova and Ukraine has caught the eyes of many in Ukraine and the EU due to the reported presence of Russian soldiers. Transnistria relies heavily on Russia's support to maintain itself, and its population is predominantly Russian-speaking and pro-Russian. Moldova's president has warned that Russia may provoke a crisis in the region ahead of Moldova's upcoming parliamentary elections to destabilize the country. This reportedly could be accomplished through energy blackmail and vote buying, as Russia is seen as responsible for Transnistria's current energy crisis. Gaugasia, located in southern Moldova, can manage its own economic, cultural and local affairs while remaining a part of the wider Moldovan state. Nonetheless, much like Transnistria, Gaugasia holds pro-Russian sentiments and has opposed further integration with the EU on many occasions. Very recently, the head of the region, Evgenia Gutul, was sentenced to 7 years in prison by a Moldovan court on charges of illegally financing an opposition party. Since winning regional elections in 2023, Gutul has been a vocal supporter of easing relations with Russia and has criticized Chisinau over its more hardline approach towards Moscow.
And now, let's take a look at the issue in greater detail. At the end of July, Sandu stood before the reporters and made a blunt accusation. Quote, "The Russian Federation wants to control Moldova from the autumn. They're preparing massive interference to get their people into the next parliament." Now, since June 2024, Moldova has been in informal accession talks with the European Union. For Sandu's pro-European Action and Solidarity Party, keeping a parliamentary majority would lock in the country's westward path. For Moscow, flipping the parliament could reverse it entirely. Current polling gives Sandu's party 39% support, with a big lead over the pro-Russian socialists, who trail at just under 15%. But here's the danger. About 30% of Moldovans are still undecided, and that's exactly where Russia sees its opening. Sandu's government says Moscow is running a coordinated campaign out of a single command point in Russia. They're using the whole toolkit: vote buying funded through cryptocurrency, stage protests designed to spark unrest, cyber attacks aimed at Moldova's institutions, disinformation pumped into the bloodstream of social media. And one group is getting special attention: the diaspora. Nearly 250,000 Moldovans abroad are eligible to vote, and they've been a solid bloc for Sandu in the past. Now this time, officials warn Moscow is trying to demobilize them, convincing them to stay home while luring others toward fake pro-European parties designed to split the vote. If you want to see how this plays out on the ground, look no further than Gagauzia. This semi-autonomous region in southern Moldova is home to Yevgeny Gutsol, a pro-Russian governor who was just sentenced to 7 years for illegally financing the now-banned Shore Party. Prosecutors say she funneled undeclared money from Russia into Moldovan politics between 2019 and 2022. Gutsol calls it a political hit job, while her supporters are protesting in the streets, and the Kremlin naturally calls the verdict politically motivated. To be fair, the symbolism is powerful. A local leader with ties to Moscow is convicted just weeks before an election in which Russia wants its allies to win big. Moldova is becoming a testing ground for hybrid warfare. Apps like Taito, run through Telegram, have allegedly been used to organize illegal vote buying, while deepfake videos are showing European politicians criticizing Moldova's EU bid. If Russia can swing Moldova's parliament without an invasion, it will have proven again that it can reshape the political map of Europe using only cash, code, and chaos. And it won't stop there. Moldova's vote could define its path for decades. President Sandu calls it unprecedented interference. In Moscow, they probably just call it Tuesday. And now here to shed more light on the issue is Adam Burakowski, Professor of Political Science from Polish Academy of Sciences. Hello, sir, and welcome to Eastern Express.
Hello, welcome, good morning. Good morning, sir.
And so, the Moldovan president Maia Sandu has been sounding off about warning about potential Russian influence in the upcoming election. Now, from the Western perspective, these are quite extraordinary claims. Can you help us understand what she is basing these warnings off of?
So we have seen Russian interference in many elections, not only in Moldova, but also in many countries of the world. Also, last year, Romanian authorities accused Russia of interference with the elections, but also there were accusations of interference of Russia in other elections and referendums like Brexit. And in Catalonia, about this independence movement. But Moldova is very close to Russia. It was a part of Soviet Union, and before that it was a part of the Russian Empire. Actually, this part of former Romanian countries, let's say, is been occupied by Russia from 19th century, and the Russian influence has always been there. During the Tsarist times, there was a period of independence Romania, when Romania gathered this land, united it with the other parts of Romania after the First World War. But after the Second World War, it went to the Soviet Union, and it was highly Sovietized. So there are many Russian-speaking people. There are many ethnic Russians in Moldova, and some of them they are sympathetic to the Russian claims and the Russian propaganda in the media, and also to Vladimir Putin and his policy. So the pro-Russian basis is there in Moldova, but they don't have the majority. The majority is pro-European, pro-Romanian, because this is their neighbor and they speak the same language. And the majority wants to integrate in the European Union, and they want to diminish the Russian influence in their country. But it is not a surprise for me, and I don't think it's a surprise for example, the European authorities that Russia is influencing or trying to influence the Moldovan elections.
Right, so you just mentioned that there's not insignificant subset of Russian-speaking people in Moldova as well as ethnic Russians. And how much of these interference that we are speaking of is coming from the warping of perceptions or swaying with propaganda? And how much of it you think is kind of direct interference when it comes to not perhaps just changing the way people vote, but actually having logistical or substantial kind of actions on the ground?
So recently, the leader of the autonomous Gagauzia Republic was arrested and condemned for exactly the same. Her name is Eugenia Guțul, and she was the leader of this autonomous republic, and she was accused of actually exactly the direct Russian influence, that she took some money from Russia, and she had to spread this all around Moldova and to increase the presence of pro-Russian parties and their capabilities. So we have this one. We have also not, as you mentioned, the media. Yeah? The media are very strong, the Russian media in Moldova. And they are accusing the governing party of all the things possible, because they want Moldova to be back to the pro-Russian camp, as we can say. There is also a issue of the Transnistria, because this is a part of Moldova that proclaimed its independence after the collapse of the Soviet Union, but has never been recognized by anybody. So this part is a separatist part, but some inhabitants of their part could vote. Not too many, like 7 to 10%. They could not vote in Transnistria. They could vote only in the core Republic of Moldova, but they also have some influence. As I said, not very big, but they do. And the Russian-speaking population, it is not like they all support Russia. Some of them, they vote also for pro-European parties, because they want their country to be integrated in the European Union, to give them more possibilities. Also, there was an important move from the European Union, that there was a big summit in Chisinau, EU-Moldova summit, and the perspectives of Moldova joining the EU, they are on track, they're on the way. And this gives a new hope for the pro-European forces and for the inhabitants of the Republic of Moldova. Maybe I could also add that the Republic of Moldova is a very peaceful country. They are very, very peaceful people. They don't want to be involved in any aggression, any war, and all that. So naturally, they would rather choose the stability and peace that the European Union offers against the war and aggression that Russia is offering.
Maia Sandu, the Moldovan president, has accused two of her political opposition parties for both being under Russian influence. My question going forward is there any other kind of opposition party that does not fall into the Russian influence umbrella, or does the EU-Russia divide become such a wedge polarizing issue within the country that this is mostly the difference that the voters are kind of splitting their opinions on?
Yes, you are right. This is the polarizing line, the pro-Russian, pro-European. Although there are some minor parties that are also pro-European, and they are not in this Maia Sandu's party. But also on the pro-Russian side, they are also divided because of many interests. Also, I have to admit here that the Republic of Moldova is not a very stable country in a political sense. There were a few very important politicians that then they were arrested, and this was Vladimir Plahotniuc, recently arrested in Greece, and Vlad Filat, also the leader of the pro-European coalition for like 10, 15 years ago. He was also arrested, accused of money laundering and defraudation and all that. So this is not a very stable country in this political sense, but Maia Sandu is one of the most stable politicians. She has a big charisma, people like her, and also she has very good relations with the Western leaders. And she's very strict on this pro-Western line. Also, the recent elections in Romania went on that Nicu Jordan, a pro-European candidate, he won with a large turnout of voters from the Republic of Moldova, because these people who have the citizenship of Romania, and there are so many of them in the Republic of Moldova, they can vote, and the majority, vast majority of them voted for Nicu Jordan in Romania. So the pro-European line in Romania is kept, and they are supporting Republic of Moldova in their pro-European choice, and they will continue to support Maia Sandu.
And looking at some of these actions that were alleged, was vote buying, and we have cyber attacks, even a deepfake to spread a lot of misinformation. All these seem like very, very intense actions taken to sway the election to the Russians' favor. So my question would be whether or not this is the baseline of how Russia's been interacting with Moldova. Is it something that Russia's always trying to meddle in, or has the effort intensified throughout the past few years?
It has been intensified, but Russians always try to influence the elections in the Republic of Moldova. They always tried to influence Moldova as an entirety. Let's call it like this. During the Soviet times, they invited and transferred many Russians to Chisinau and to the regions just to change the ethnic composition of this territory. Also, there was, when it was a part of Romania, the Soviet intelligence, they tried to destabilize that region. Before that, it was a part of Tsarist Empire, and also the Tsarist Empire, it influenced a lot Moldova, in the sense that they put migrants from all around the Tsarist Empire, and they were some of them were very pro-Russian, loyal to the Tsarist state. So there's nothing new, but there are new tools, and these internet and online tools are new tools, and they are just using it very intensively.
Right. So perhaps a lot of it is also the acceleration of technology as well, right? Now, last but not least, you talk about how the EU-Russian divide, and whichever way the Moldova wants to go, is a very kind of polarizing, dividing issue. However, we're still seeing about a 30% of undecided voters. Why is it so hard for Moldovans to kind of have a position and a strong opinion on which candidate they support?
You know, the issue is that many inhabitants of Moldova, the citizens of Moldova, they also work abroad. And some of them, they work in the European Union, but some of them, they work in Moscow. And these who work in Moscow, they are most probably pro-Russian, and they would vote for pro-Russian coalitions. But these undecided, they think that their country is not progressing well. Okay. And they might be voting for a pro-European coalition, but they are like disillusioned because their progress is too slow and all that. So they are possible recipients of Russian propaganda. So this is the thing, and this is the answer why they are not they cannot decide yet. Because if they, for many reasons, they could have something against the President Maia Sandu. Mm-hmm. But they don't want to go for the pro-Russian coalition, and right. That's why they are undecided. Maybe they will be absent.
And I think that's also a very good reason why perhaps we see a lot of intense Russian action, since if there's a very big base of undecided voters, perhaps there's more low-hanging fruit there to grab. Thank you so much for your input and insight. I really appreciate it, and thanks for being with us on Eastern Express.
Thank you.
And now we're moving on to the Eastern News Flash, a series of all the other stories from the East that you don't want to miss. Another prisoner swap has taken place between Russia and Ukraine. This time, Kyiv brought home 84 prisoners, some of whom had been in captivity since 2014.
The latest swap takes place in the wake of a series of larger exchanges that were agreed upon between Moscow and Kiev at talks in Istanbul between May and July of this year. President Volodymyr Zelensky says that among the returnees are not only soldiers who had been held for over a decade at this point, but also some Mariupol defenders. 3 women from the Donetsk and Luhansk regions are also among those returned in this swap. Unfortunately, almost all of the former prisoners require physical therapy and medical assistance due to their treatment at the hands of the Russians. The exchange is the last one before the high-stakes summit in Alaska, which US President Donald Trump will meet with Vladimir Putin, the first time that Putin will meet with an American president since the start of the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
The United Nations says that July saw the highest rate of civilian casualties in Ukraine since 2022. Almost 300 civilians were killed and almost 1,400 wounded last month alone.
A total of at least 1,674 civilian casualties were recorded in Ukraine in the month of July alone, topping a previous horrible record set by May 2022, according to the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. The much higher casualty rate is the result of intensifying Russian attacks against Ukraine's civilian infrastructure and residential areas, marring ongoing attempts at reaching peace between both sides. The surge in casualties has been mostly limited to frontline areas and regions where the fighting is fiercest. Since the start of the war, the UN has documented up to 14,000 civilian deaths and over 35,500 wounded civilians, though the real figure is likely much higher due to Russia preventing independent monitoring in some of the most war-affected regions.
Central Asia and the Caucasus are surging ahead in digital connectivity. A new global ranking puts Kazakhstan, Georgia, and others on par with parts of the EU.
A new report from the International Telecommunications Union shows that the CIS region, especially Kazakhstan and Georgia, is nearing European levels of internet access and digital skills. Kazakhstan leads Central Asia with 97% of households online, surpassing several EU states. Georgia leads the Caucasus in mobile phone ownership, while Armenia boasts the highest home internet penetration. Azerbaijan showed the biggest year-on-year improvement, and Kyrgyzstan stands out for maximizing its digital infrastructure. However, gaps remain. Uzbekistan lags in digital literacy despite high access, and Tajikistan and Turkmenistan weren't surveyed due to data issues. Still, the trend is clear: regional players are going digital fast.
And that's all for this episode of Eastern Express. For more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.